Welcome to the Dynamic Leadership Overview. This is the third of a four-part series. This one is on development plans. Today, we're pulling many threads together into something practical, immediately actionable, and transformative. You don't need a full HR department or a corporate-sized budget to get started. You just need clarity on what good leadership looks like in your company and the will to create consistency. Today, we're talking about creating structure and accountability for how people grow in your business, from the front line to the executive team. It's also a formula to establish a culture of learning and development, which naturally enables a growth mindset across your team for the long haul. You can start small. Any business can benefit from identifying just one skill that matters, one skill tied to the vision for the strategic leadership team. That alone can change the way that your organization operates. Think about this. When a dental office hires a hygienist, they know exactly what that person can do. There's a shared language, known certifications, and a clear protocol for how things get done, from patient care to insurance processing. But when that same office hires a marketing manager or marketing specialist, there are fewer standards. A degree in marketing or previous experience doesn't guarantee they'll understand the priorities, tone, methods that align with that specific practice and the industry. The gap is even wider for leadership and management. Many leaders are promoted because they've gotten results in the past, not necessarily because they mastered leadership. Over time, they rely on models they picked up from past bosses, school, or pure instinct. The good ones adapt, but left unchecked, this can lead to a mixed metaphor of leadership styles in your company: family, political, military, populist, and more. And it's just not about inconsistent results. It can lead to friction as people perceive unfair treatment. That, left unchecked, can lead to what's called a toxic environment. Here's the distinction that matters. Skills in trades and clinical professions often follow structured development protocols. But in business, especially in soft skills and leadership, it's easy to rely too heavily on informal learning and assumptions. In dynamic leadership, we advocate development plans that bring science and structure into that gray area so we can develop consistent performance expectations across the organization. And we're not just closing performance gaps. We're defining standards of excellence that align with your company's strategy and desired culture. That's a powerful shift. There are two types of development plans that you need in your toolkit. Gap-based development plans, this is more traditional, is used to correct or improve specific deficiencies. These are focused, results-oriented, and often time-sensitive. And then there's foundational development plans. These are used to align someone with how you lead and operate in your business, to get that common language I was talking about earlier. These ensure that new leaders, no matter how experienced, are grounded in your organization's leadership style and approach. Whether it's feedback, project cadence, cultural values, whatever it is, you know that there's alignment with your leadership team. Gone are the days where the charismatic leader can simply rely on people figuring out how he or she wants to operate or what he or she expects. Even when talking about experienced people entering your organization, a newly hired operations manager might already know how to run a floor. But if you use a framework like multipliers to guide leadership expectations or apply a 5-step problem-solving model as standard practice, they need to learn your playbook. Otherwise, it's like a new addition to a sports team trying to run the plays from the last team. Once we treat leadership development with the same respect and clarity we give to operational training, we dramatically improve consistency, accountability, and long-term growth. I'll provide universal templates that you can use to get started. We'll also explore how proficiency is assessed using pass-fail scoring, numerical scoring, a tiered expertise level approach. There's different methods to support fair evaluation, targeted coaching, and role readiness. Now, even better, you don't need to wait to implement a plan. You can start small with a single skill like how your leaders assign tasks or facilitate team meetings. Or go even simpler. A simple framework, for example, a basic XY axis, like results versus methods, growth versus profitability, and putting that on a 2-axis grid, it allows you to have a different kind of discussion than just talking about either one of those in a vacuum. So it can be a teaching tool as well as a development benchmark, and this can be done in less than a half hour. You introduce the framework, have a discussion about a real world problem, something simple so you can push on it, something that's not urgent or impactful so you can push on it, make some distinctions, get a common language, and then apply it to something real time. You can do all that in less than a half hour. Do that with each of your leadership team members and then have them do it with their staff. And in 2 weeks, everybody will be operating on that same thing. Go a little step further. Add in a problem-solving model, a 5-step problem-solving model. There's different variations. There's even a 6-step model, which I like, which includes reflect and adjust as the 6th step. But that's also sometimes included in the 5th step. In the 5th step with implement, test, and adjust. So whether you're a business owner with 5 employees or 50, the most powerful thing you can do is make the invisible visible. Define the skills, name the standards, and give your people a roadmap to grow. And when you do that, you'll find that you foster a growth mindset. One of the challenges with having a growth mindset in an organization is that it's very easy to slip into pass-fail. This happens for a variety of reasons, but one of the most common ones is it's basically what's been learned just by doing and moving along, and also the mentality of school. Since there's no testing or final exams or grades, people come up with this pass-fail. And if you think about it from a school standpoint, there is a learning curve, right? A person could go from 70 to 100 and get an A, even though they may have started at a 70, they can still have a 4.0. Whereas in business, because we don't have this clarity, we don't have these distinctions all the time, it's easy to go pass fail. And when you go pass fail, people start hiding the deficiencies. They don't want to learn because they don't want to look stupid. But when you have a development plan that is constantly adapted and also goes out over 2 years with touch points along the way, you're constantly talking about development, and no one's going to be perfect in everything. So there's always going to be developmental opportunities. There's always going to be some middle level players. Everybody's not going to be a mastery level in everything. They don't need to be a master at everything. But your trainer is going to have a certain level of expertise. A project leader is going to have a different level of expertise than somebody who's on the leadership team, but on the operations side. So that gives you an idea. But in practice, what you'll find is that having a shared language goes a long way. Using shared frameworks goes a long way. And these things become natural. They become part of the fabric. And the reason why I'm staying on this point about the growth mindset is that by continuing to use the same process, people are adapting and you're building on it. And if you go back to last week when I talked about developmental language, you're building habits with your processes, so you're not always training. You're not always dealing with new stuff. It's literally building and building and building. And because it's all coming out of the vision, it's aligned with where you're going long term. So I'll get off the soapbox and let's start taking a look at some examples. And I'll start with the matrix because it's simple and it's one that I found very, very useful. So there's one of the pet peeves I have with a lot of the business communication is that there's so much focus on growth, and it's at all costs. And it takes on a life of its own because what you have is sometimes salespeople who are selling to the industry, they're so focused on revenue and they forget that only about 5 to 10% of that revenue actually goes through to the profit. And if it doesn't serve their need, obviously, if they're selling you something, they're going to be talking about revenue. But you have to remember as the owner that you're paying for these things out of what amounts to profit, not out of revenue. It may come off the revenue, but it's impacting your profit. And until you're getting a return on it, so what I would say is you have gating and you have sort of a way to test to see if things are going well and give it 3 months. I know one person likes to talk about every process is on trial for its life. That was his way of looking at it. And then this, with the VUCA environment, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, it's only getting to be more and more and more. I mean, offers is showing up at hyper speed now because artificial intelligence can build apps and offers and create new landing pages, and this is happening at hyper speed. So there's always something new coming in, and you can feel it. You can feel the amount of competition that's out there, marketing to businesses. So we don't want to just focus on growth. We want to focus on profitable growth. And the way to do that is you don't think about growth one day and profit the next day. You look at things in the context of growth and profit. And you can, if it's down here, you might say, well, you know what, this is a non-starter. It's a good way to say this is not going to work for us. And, if you can get something that's up here, that's where we want to be. So, and then you have your other things that are more growth oriented, and you have other initiatives that are profit oriented. This gets your cross-functional teams working together because you have to be able to find ways to make profit. It gets you looking at ad copy instead of just throwing more ads out there. You're looking at the conversion rates inside the ads, which you're probably doing anyway, but there's different ways you can change how you're marketing, and whether you're using ascension ladders or cross-selling and upselling, there's different ways that you can extract more profit from the spend. Also, different ways of advertising. I remember the amount of, everybody had a solution for advertising, and still does. Everybody has a new way of lead generation. And I'm not saying they don't work, but what you want to do is look at things that are directional with your vision. You want to make sure that you're using things that are sustainable and you're not having to reinvent the wheel every time, because every time you reinvent the wheel, you're skipping some steps on that flywheel. Remember the good to great, the flywheel, turning that flywheel every day. You come in and turn it a bit. Well, if you're constantly changing, losing some of your momentum. Another one I like to use is probability and severity. So, and this can go two ways. You have situations where people are so caught up in the fact that there might be this problem that occurs, this risk, there's a risk out there. Well, yeah, we always have risks, but one way to look at risk is what's the probability that this risk will occur? And if the risk does occur, what's the likelihood that it's severe enough to be an impact? Some stuff is just normal cost of doing business, right? But if it's a high severity existential kind of event, and that's going to be out here, but the probability is very low, that takes a different kind of mitigation than if it's up here, high severity and high probability. Even something that's in here could be something that you're paying attention to because it could be an impact. And then you're able to look at it on a relative basis. Another one I like to use, succession planning. You have to decide who's going to be promoted next. Too often people, it makes sense, it's easy, and managers and leaders tend to look for the expedient thing, right? Everybody wants to, go home and get a good night's sleep, right, and move on. And also there's a sort of a pattern for managers to be efficient, and that efficiency leads to expediency. So I like to say effective first, then efficient. You can even make that a grid, right? You can even do effective and efficiency. You can even do this. You can even look at effectiveness and efficiency when you're working on a project or a plan. And I have a grid I'll go through with you in a moment that illustrates that. And then the one I was talking about was succession planning. So this could be project related. This is risk related. And then this one is succession planning. So in succession planning, we have results and we have methods. Just because the person got results doesn't mean that they should be the one taking over the department. And I know you've seen this where people got results because they cut corners, but maybe they're just using loopholes that are already there. It doesn't mean they're a bad person. It's just that they're cutting corners. Well, that's not necessarily the person you want. I know in the book, Stephen Covey likes to talk about in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he liked to talk about the manager who got promoted because they ran the equipment without getting maintenance. And, obviously it sounds like more of a manufacturing example, right? But they ran the equipment without getting it maintained. and they got promoted because of their results. And then the next person who comes along, the machine's always down, and it makes the first person look even better than they are. And then the other person looks worse because they can't get the results, and then they're under pressure, and then it's just, you're constant. When you're on your heels, it's always harder to get going. So we want to look at results, and we want to look at methods. And you're not trying to hire somebody or promote somebody who's here, and you're not trying to promote somebody who's here. And so what you get with these is you get this arc. All of these, you end up with an arc, because you're not going to have perfection, but you're trying to get things that are out here. You don't want to, obviously you wouldn't promote the person who's here unless there's a very specific reason, a very specific project. But what you're wanting to do is move out here and getting a balance. You want some people who are more on the result side and some people who are more on the perfect method side. But what it does, it eliminates the likelihood of getting somebody in there who got results because they cut corners or because they knew somebody. So those are examples. And these 4 you could literally take to your leadership team in one staff meeting and introduce. And don't take my 4, change based on your organization. But now when somebody brings you a proposal, when they bring you an idea, they want to talk to you about something, you can have a common expectation that they use one of those 4 frameworks. And another one I like to use, this one is when you're thinking about a new option, a project, an initiative. Option 1, 3, 4. And of course you don't always need 4, but the idea is that if you want to get more than one solution. So the 5-step problem solving model is clearly identify the problem. That's an important step, especially in operations environments. They often miss that. They solve the problem real quick and create new problems in the process. But that's okay, because that's what they do. They're constantly fixing problems. They don't want to spend time draining the swamp. They're busy fighting alligators. They're just going to keep fighting alligators. Whereas what we want to do is get in the habit of spending time draining the swamp, so one day there's no more alligators. But what we're going to do is, this is before we're in this very early on in the idea stage, maybe even in the brainstorming stage. As I said, the problem-solving models clearly identify the problem, brainstorm for possible solutions, select the best solution, and then implement and follow up. Or you have to obviously design and build it and then implement it and follow up. And there's also short-term fix you can put in there. You can come up with, like I said, adapt or reflect and adapt or adjust. But what we're going to do is score 1 to 5, 5 being good, except for risk. Risk is 5 to 1. So this is leverage. This is ease of implementation, ease of build. This is risk, and this is return. So this is another thing that you can introduce it in one setting, in a meeting, go through an exercise, and we'll talk about this next week when I get into deep practice, but I really want to emphasize it's not a verbal conversation. We have way, way, way too much where people know and don't do. To know and not do is to not know. Doing, remember, most cognitive processing is physiological. People operate their lives 95% by habit. If we rely on communication, words, the likelihood of having an impact, you're working on the 5%, because the 95% by habit is going to take over right away. The 95% by habit is the neural pathways. They're formed, they got myelin wrapped around them, the synaptogenesis is supporting it, you got the dopamine, the neurotransmitter, and so that habit is what's going to win. Given the choice between belief or habit and willpower, belief and habit win. So you don't want to just introduce it. You want to have a conversation about it, do a mini case study, use 2 or 3 things that you're thinking about, have each person in the room come up with one initiative that they think is good, and then you could do this scoring. So people get to use it, but then the next time you have an idea that you're thinking about, use this model. And just always go back to this model. Now we've got 2 frameworks. Both of them can be taught in one session. They're both skills that people can develop. And once you get into the habit of people learning skills, it gets easier because we need bigger skills. We need to be able to present to internal audiences, external audience.